We're going to start things off with today's big story, and that is indeed a hunt for a national title. Women's gymnastics NCAA championships are this weekend. Michigan's the reigning national champs. They won their regional this year. No one has repeat as a national champion since Oklahoma did back in 2016 and 2017. And the head coach of Michigan, Bev Plocki, is joining us now from Texas. She's going to be in Fort Worth for the championships, which start on Thursday. Bev, you won the title last year. What feels similar about this year?
Well, being back in the same location here at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, and we're staying at the same hotel. So there are a lot of things, as we came into the hotel last night and saw the arena, things that seem very familiar, that bring back a lot of really great memories. We'll go over to the facility today for a practice. The equipment's in the same location that it was last year. So a lot of things that are feeling very familiar at this point.
Give me something specific that you can take from last year's experience, whether it's the way you talk to the girls or the time you have a meal that you're there or the things you do to loosen them up. Give me something you learned from last year that you can use this year.
Just breathing in that confidence and just constantly talking to them about enjoying every moment. I've said it 1,000 times. We don't have offensive and defensive strategies in gymnastics. So we have to rely on the fact that we are good enough and we don't have to try to be better than we are, because as good as we are has gotten us here. It won us a title last year. So we just have to be confident. We have to go in there and enjoy ourselves and not pay attention to what's going on around us.
Let's talk about some individuals. Natalie just won the award for top senior gymnast in the country. I assume she gave an acceptance speech and all she did was talk about you. That's what I'm assuming, Bev.
Actually, there wasn't really, because we still are not having a banquet due to the after effects of COVID. The way that AI presented it, they did interviews when we got here yesterday for all of the finalists of the award. And then last night when we did our team stretch, the person from AI who gives the award came, Lisa Ebersol came to our team stretch and awarded the award to Natalie at that point. So, it was nice and it was intimate because she got to be around just her team and our coaches. So no acceptance speech to date, but I'm sure that people will be asking her about it and there will be more interviews to come.
Okay, so it sounds like you have to schedule an opportunity for her to thank you publicly. I'm going to make this work, Bev, is what I'm getting for.
All right. I'm sure she'd be happy to.
Well, I'm sure you were happy the other day when you saw Gabby Wilson get a perfect 10 on the vault. What is it like watching that?
I mean, it's amazing. And we've had a number of different athletes this year, which is also incredible to me. We don't have any one person that's carrying this team on their back. We really, our strength is spread amongst our team more than I can ever remember. And so to see different athletes step up at different times has been incredible to me. And this was Gabby Wilson's moment in the sun for her to get the 10. She's gotten a 10 on floor already this season. I'm just so incredibly thrilled for her as an individual and how far she's come since coming into our program.
How often do you as a coach watch something and go, that should be a 10? Whether they get it or not, will you go, I really think that was a perfect 10?
We all have biased opinions of our own teams, and sometimes we're our own worst critics as well, because we know where the mistakes lie. But many times, this individual for sure on floor, I watched early in the season and thought that routine should be a 10. That routine should be a 10. And she was getting 995, 995, and then finally broke through with a 10 at our Rutgers meet for the first time. So, I'm just incredibly happy for all of our athletes. And like I said, the fact that the talent and the individual accolades have been spread, amongst several athletes on our team.
I assume afterwards you told Gabby, now that you've done it, I expect nothing less. 10's the rest of the way out.
It's interesting that you bring up the word expect or expectation, because that is one thing that I have told my team over and over again since before we started the season, that I do not want them to feel that there is an expectation. I want them to feel confident. I want them to feel the confidence that I have in them. I want them to believe in themselves. I want them to believe in the ability to come back here and repeat. but that is very different than the pressure of an expectation. So expect and expectation are words that we have not used this year.
It sounds like you'd be a much better coach than I would. Okay, we're learning here. You said in an article recently that you quote a Lloyd Carr saying, "Know the outcome before you begin." What do you mean?
Well, he came and spoke to our team. I invited him a number of years ago when he was still the football coach, or maybe had just retired as a football coach. And I've always had a tremendous respect for him as a person and as a coach. And when he was talking to my team, he talked about being confident. He talked about the fact that his definition for confidence is knowing the outcome before you begin. That's the ultimate form of confidence, is that you're so confident in yourself that there's no other option other than success and the outcome that you desire. And so we've talked about that a lot. And I think it's a perfect explanation or a perfect description of what confidence should be.
Okay, so that's interesting though, Bev, because you just talked about not putting expectations on and yet also trying to have enough confidence to know the outcome before it happens. How do you balance those two?
Because expectation is something that is a distraction. You're focusing on the outcome. And confidence is knowing that you have the ability to go out there and do that routine and that the outcome will take care of itself. And that's the other thing that we talk about. Control the things you have control over. You have control over your attitude, your focus, staying in the present at the moment. If you're thinking about sticking the dismount when you're in your first tumbling pass, things probably aren't going to go well in your first or second tumbling pass. So you have to stay in the present and be confident and just have the belief that you're going to be able to do the routine the way you've practiced it 1,000 times.
I always find it fascinating when coaches learn from other coaches or borrow things from them. You brought up Lloyd Carr. Are there other coaches in other sports that you found yourself going, that's interesting, I'm going to take that?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that's the highest form of flattery is when you see something that you admire or that you think will transfer and relate to something that you're doing within your team. And, Carol Hutchins is a legendary coach at the University of Michigan, and she has taught me so much about just what it is to be a Michigan Wolverine and the things, always wanting to leave the program better than you found it. That's something that came from Carol. So yeah, there are a lot of things, and I love the coaching community at Michigan and the fact that, we have so many programs that are so unbelievably successful that, sharing that information in a way that can help all of us is something I think that is a trademark of Michigan.
You said a couple days ago that the field that you're competing against has gotten so good. There's more parity now than you've seen in years past. Why is that?
Well, this year in particular, because most every school was able to bring back all of their seniors. And for a lot of schools, that was 4 or 5 athletes that were very, very high level athletes. For us, unfortunately, we had one beamer team that was in our senior class that graduated last year, and she was ready to move on with life and go out and conquer the world, which she's doing. All of our seniors last year are fabulously successful and doing amazing. So our depth this year is maybe a little bit less than some other teams. But that said, I feel like we have a good amount of depth within the athletes that we have, but we're carrying about 13, or we are carrying 13 athletes, and other teams have upwards of 20 athletes on their team. So just by sheer numbers, the depth at a high level of talent is there across the country. And so, that makes a difference.
This weekend, you're going directly up against Missouri, Florida, and Auburn. How familiar are you with them? Or maybe the better question is, are you supposed to be at all familiar with them?
Well, I mean, obviously, Florida is the only team that we haven't seen in person. We competed against Missouri at regionals. We competed against Auburn at home in our last home meet of the season. So we've seen those teams and we've competed against those teams. But we certainly have seen Florida on TV. We know the amazing talent and athletes that they have on their team. But like I said before, we can't focus on them. We have to just go out and believe that we have the talent, and we have to do our job. on any given day, it's like any sport. You have to perform on that day, and we have to have, our best performances Thursday to be able to qualify to Saturday, and then we'll really have to have our best performances on Saturday if we have, thoughts of being able to repeat.
Well, and that's my last question for you is, heavy is the head that wears the crown. You are the reigning champions. What is the hardest part about trying to repeat?
I think the expectation that others place on you, and that's what we've really tried to guard against. Social media is a blessing and a curse. You want people saying great things about you, but there, both sides come along with that. And the people who, critique every single routine of every single meet during the whole season and put feedback on there. And, I have just said to my athletes over and over and over again that, that you can't be disappointed if you just go out there and do your very best. And I will never be disappointed in you. If we put our best gymnastics on the floor, we let the outcome take care of itself. And whatever that outcome is, I will be incredibly proud of them.
Bev Plocki, the first session is Thursday, then the finals on Saturday. Enjoy your time in Texas and best of luck. Big Ten softball looks like this. You see there's a handful of pretty darn good teams there at the top of the conference, but Nebraska is sitting there with a perfect record in conference play. They are 10-0. First time they've started a conference play since 2004 with that good of a mark. Oh, by the way, they swept Iowa yesterday, so they're on a 15-game winning streak. That's their longest since 2002. Rhonda Revelle is good enough to join us now. She's the head coach of the Nebraska softball team. She's our big interview. Rhonda, those are fun stats to say. How fun is this year?
It's been a lot of fun, but it's not even fun because of the record or the streak. It's been fun because of the players. They've really made it very enjoyable for all of us.
And your players are swinging the bats. What makes you most pleased with your offense so far?
I think a few things. They've been really diligent from the last out of last year in the weight room and working with our strength coach and working with Diane Miller and buying into a team offense philosophy. And they've just really been students of their offensive game. And it's been a lot of fun to watch them grow and develop and gain confidence.
Is there a tangible thing you've noticed, though, whether it's working the count better or smarter base running? Is there something you can focus on specifically as to why it's so good?
Well, I think number one, what I said about team offense, understanding their part, where they are in the lineup and their role in the lineup, and then also understanding, I think Diane does a really nice job of working with each individual hitter and trying to maximize their strengths, and rather than using a cookie cutter approach. So I think that's been understandable. There is a strike zone, but every hitter has their own strike zone, and really knowing where you can have a good pitch that you can drive and hit hard, I think has been really important too.
Let's talk about Billie Andrews. It's not like she came out of nowhere. She was excellent last year for you guys.
Yeah.
But she's been exploding with power early on in this season. How come?
Well, I think if you would have watched her in high school and club ball, she had that power then. She's just a five-star athlete. We knew what we got when we recruited her. So to say that I'm pleased, yes. To say that I'm surprised, no. I think that, Billie is a very competitive, very good athlete and a very hard worker. And so you just see it all come together. And it hasn't really surprised us to have her put up the numbers that she's put up.
How has Maya Felder fit into this team?
Beautifully. Maya has fit in just perfectly. Really good fit for us. Good culture player. Good at setting a work ethic type of player. I've said this before. No one has to motivate Maya. Maya motivates Maya. So she's really fit in that way to our blue collar work ethic, and has just really fit into the middle of our lineup really nicely as well.
What has most satisfied you about your team pitching so far?
That they're really taking, first of all, they don't care who's on the mound. They just care that we get the job done. And sometimes you don't always have that in your pitching staff. And, they're there to pick up, each other up. If we have a complete game, great. But if somebody needs to come in and finish it out, they're all about that as well. So they're really a unified pitching staff, and I love that about them.
What is the best way to describe Olivia Farrell's personality?
Serious, a worker, a warrior, a maximizer, and driven for success.
What is she doing in the circle so well this year?
She's always worked really hard. No one's ever outworked her. I think she's just seeing the game differently. She's seeing hitters differently. She's understanding her strengths and pitching to her strengths and not worrying about comparison or anything like that. So I'm just so pleased for her and happy for her.
How does a player get to that point, Rhonda, where they see the game differently? Is it reps? Is there something you can do as a coach to sort of mold that?
You know, every athlete is on a different journey, and it takes a different amount of time to reach their destination. And I just think with Liv, her gaining this 5th year was a real blessing for her. And she said, you know, I'm just going to cherish every day. And I think something just clicked in her that almost slowed her down. And yeah, it just slowed her down and gave her a different perspective. And it's almost like she has an old soul out there. And like I said, I just couldn't be more happy for her because no one has ever outworked Olivia Farrell. And so when you see success coming to someone that every day of their career has completely emptied the tank, it's just really rewarding. And I want her to cherish every single moment.
That feels like an important step in almost any career, but certainly in a performance career, the ability to slow things down.
Yeah.
You see it in sports, you see it in acting or comedy. When did that happen for you as a coach, where you were like, oh, I'm feeling the pace come down, I'm in a little more control here?
I think it was last Saturday.
Is that right? That recent, huh?
Well, you know, I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but I think we would all be fibbing if we say we ever really arrive there. I think we're always on a continuum, and it's something that we constantly, at least myself, I can only speak for myself, that we constantly have to work at. And, you know, there's a lot of self-talk that goes on with coaching, too. And in the sports that have, you know, 10 or 15 seconds between pitches, you could say a lot of things to yourself, so you better be careful in what you do.
Okay, you're clearly being humble because you're this legendary head coach. You've been in the Hall of Fame for a dozen years already. So there had to have been at some point in the journey where you're like, I feel confident now where I am.
That's a really hard question. I will tell you, it was 2002. We were in Columbus, Georgia. We were still in the Big 12. We were playing Michigan that day. Carol Hutchins is a dear friend of mine. And I remember going up to her before the game and said, Nebraska needs this win more than Michigan. And I probably do, too, more than you do. And I said, we'll explain it later. I'll explain it later. I just sort of put it out there like that. And we were fortunate enough. I think it was a 2-1 ball game, and we had the 2. And you know, I think at that moment that was a signature win in our program against a great, iconic Michigan team. They've always been that way. And I think you just have moments like that where you can kind of exhale and go, okay, maybe we're doing some things right in our program.
Yeah. And I assume Hutch was like, okay, fine, you guys win. We don't have to try hard. We'll give it to you, right?
Well, you told the story about Hutch earlier, so I think you know what Hutch has to say about most things. It usually has a little sarcasm to it.
When did you first meet Carol Hutchins?
1988. She was coming out to San Jose State. I was the assistant coach out there, coaching with Kathy Strahan, who was a Michigan State grad and a teammate of Hutch's, and they played shortstop and second base together. And so I met Hutch right there. And then when I got hired at Nebraska in the summer of 1992, you know, Hutch was one of my first calls and goes, okay, you're a first-time head coach. You're in the Midwest now. You call me if you need anything. And that really started a friendship that hasn't really even had a pause. In fact, I would say, especially during the season, we probably talk weekly.
And yet, when you you join the conference that she's in. I mean, were there, horses' heads in the beds at this point? Did we ramp up the rivalry?
Yeah, it was tough. I remember when we were in the College World Series. Again, we were still in the Big 12, but we were in the College World Series, and we said if we match up in the championship round, we're just going to hug at home plate and share the trophy. And that was a great talk. But I think the hardest thing about being Hutch's friend and being in the same conference is that we've always shared so much as coaches, but also about our teams and working through things and seeking advice from one another that, when we're going to play each other, that makes it a little more challenging to share those things until after that competition happens.
I bet it is. Well, I'm going to have an extra eye the next time you two play to see what the pregame discussion is like near home base. All right, you got Minnesota on tap this weekend. Rhonda, good luck on the weekend. Congrats on the great start, and thanks for giving us some of your time. Yeah, thank yous all around belong to Gopher and Wolverine men's hockey. Great seasons those two had. While each of them fell short of the ultimate goal of a national title, they did both make it to the Frozen Four, a major accomplishment in any season for sure. And we're going to talk hockey now by bringing in Paul Caponigri, who was there in Boston. And I'm not saying you're a bad luck charm, but you were there, and both Big Ten teams lost. So has Kevin Warren banned you from attending any future hockey events, Paul?
We did this 4 years ago. We had 3 teams in the Frozen Four, and obviously, and none of them won it. So, I shouldn't say that out loud. Maybe they won't let me come back. But I don't know. It was frustrating. I think the way these teams. Of course, if you're not the winning, there's one team that's going to be happy at the end of the year. And then the expectations with Michigan, especially, all those guys came back this year for that big reason of winning a national championship and to come up a short and losing in overtime. Because, in hockey and playoffs and whatnot, it's one shot, one lucky bounce, whatnot can change your season in a good way or a bad way. And unfortunately it ended for Michigan. The talent is it's not always just about talent. It's luck and all the good stuff like that. And it didn't work out for him on Thursday in Boston.
So to be clear, you did not deny that you've been banned by Kevin Warren. I'll just make a quick note of that as we move forward.
I've heard nothing.
Okay, good. Nothing yet. How do you overall assess what the past year was for the conference in men's hockey?
It was a good year. I think the balance was probably the biggest difference. The first year where there was so much not parity. The top 4 were so separated from the bottom 3 in the conference. And then, I think, Ohio State being the big surprise team, they were picked by everyone to be last in the league and were first place up until about the last 2 weeks of the regular season. And then, Minnesota and Michigan lived up to their expectations. Notre Dame was their consistent self. And then you had some teams that struggled. I think Wisconsin was picked high, but you wondered where their scoring was going to be. And, they never were able to find that scoring and it affected them. Penn State was a young team. And then, Michigan State just hasn't been able to get out of kind of the Big Ten. So I thought it was good in terms of the top level teams were good. Ohio State just missing the tournament by percentage points. But then getting the 2 teams that you thought at the start were going to be the best, ended up being the best, got to the Frozen Four. That's pretty good stuff. We're the only team that had 2 teams from a conference in that Frozen Four.
And you brought up the talent that Michigan had. It's hard to ever duplicate that. I mean, the top 5 draft picks were basically all maize and blue guys. Of those guys, who's most likely to make an impact in the NHL soon?
Oh, they already are, aren't they? They played last night. There you go. Matty Beniers got a point on the first goal, an assist on the first goal of the game for the Seattle Kraken. And then Owen Power. I think he's the one that's going to step in right away and look like he could have been there all year. And I think a lot of people thought that anyway. But he just looks dynamic. I think Johnson is going to make his debut tonight for Columbus, along with Nick Blankenberg, actually, which will be interesting because you have two more Michigan guys going to play in Columbus. So that will be an interesting dynamic with the, Ohio State crowd there. But yeah, look at all these guys that signed, Brisson and then Thomas Bordeleau. I thought maybe those two guys, there was a chance they might come back for a junior year, but they were dominant players and ready to play. It's just a matter of how ready they could be. And you won't know until they lace them up. But for me, it's Owen Power with Maddie Beniers right behind him. And they made their debuts last night and did really well right off the bat, and it's not surprising.
Are there any more? I mean, that felt like everybody. Are we done with Wolverines turning pro?
Well, I think the one more guy that we're waiting to see on is Luke Hughes, the dynamic freshman, the third of the triumvirate of brothers. I mean, with Quinn and Jack, who are already in the league. Quinn played 2 years at Michigan, and then White went right into the league and played really well. I think that's a good template for him to look at his brother. But, Luke had a great year. He was a top 10 Hobie Baker finalist for Player of the Year. I think if he comes back, he's the favorite to win that award. And I think it's good for him. I mean, only he knows and his family knows what's best for him. But I think another year in college has been proven with his brother and a guy like Cale Makar now, who is probably the best defenseman in the NHL. He played 2 years in college. I think that those are good templates for him to go out there, maybe dominate at University of Michigan one more year, and then be ready to go to the NHL.
Let's turn to the Gophers now. Several players are going to make decisions on coming back or turning pro. Where are your eyes in Minneapolis?
I'd love to say you hope Ben Myers comes back, but I think he's just at the point where he's got to decide between so many teams in the NHL that he wants to make a good decision for himself where he goes. You hope they have a couple of defensemen, Jackson Lacombe and Ryan Johnson, who both could be seniors that, man, if they come back and can be those, their defense will be really good because we already know one guy, and we'll get to him in a minute, that decided to come back. But if those two guys can come back, Matthew Nyes, everything's pointing to him coming back to be a sophomore. He's kind of like Luke Hughes in the terms of, he could go to the NHL right now and do pretty well. But I think, he's a guy that another year of development, maybe exceeding so much more at the college level, will benefit him, getting more physically mature. You have a whole year where, you hit the weights a lot more when you're playing 35 college games as opposed to an 82-game NHL schedule. And that age, like 19, 20s, where you can develop. So Matthew Nyes is a big one. Those three guys. And then, we haven't heard anything about Sammy Walker, if there's a possibility he come back for his fifth year, the captain for the last 3 years. If you get all those guys coming back, man, with the recruits they have coming in, Minnesota would be an older team. I think that would help. Physically more mature, which I think hurt them against Mankato State in the Frozen Four. So those would be the guys I'd be looking for.
Let's turn to Ohio State for one more pro note. They just had a freshman sign with the Boston Bruins. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, Georgi Merkulov kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, but he scored 20 goals. I don't blame him. He's a free agent. I don't blame him for leaving early. He was an older freshman. I think he's 21 years old now. So, he's a little older and he, ready for that step. But I mean, he came over here from Russia, learned the language, and then dominated and helped this, like I said, they were supposed to be 7th place team. And he was one of the surprise guys that helped them elevate to the top of the league. And I'm happy for him, excited as an alum to see a guy sign a pro contract. And he'll be missed, obviously, next year. But if they can get, Jakub Dobish, the goaltender, to come back, and Mason Lohrei, their other dynamic freshman defenseman, the Buckeyes are set up to be pretty good next year.
We still didn't get to the new head coach that will be coming to Michigan State. We're going to look at this scene this week from Columbus, 7 Forever. This, of course, a vigil for former OSU QB Dwayne Haskins. Buckeye fans and players lit candles and left flowers at Ohio Stadium Tuesday to remember Haskins, who was killed on Saturday. There were also 7 minutes of silence as a nod to his jersey number before the marching band played the alma mater. Bill Landis is the Ohio State beat writer for The Athletic. He's good enough to join us now. And let's start there with the tragic death of Haskins. You know, a picture like that can tell a story, Bill, but you're in that state. You're there. How does it feel in terms of the heaviness in the air these days?
Yeah, it's kind of surreal, honestly, because Dwayne was so young, and it really feels like just yesterday that he was here. And I think that's part of the reason why it hit people as hard as it did. Like, Dwayne obviously was a very talented player, and I myself, as a member of the media and a lot of fans, I think connected with him that way. Certainly, there were a lot of people in his personal life that connected with him on a different level. You'd probably say a more important level than that. But when it comes down to it, it's just a young kid who had an incredible personality, just a ton of life to him, and I think touched a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So whether you were a huge Ohio State fan or not, I think Dwayne was the kind of guy who was just so captivating that you felt some sort of connection to him no matter what.
The Buckeyes spring game is Saturday. What do we expect to see from them in regards to Dwayne's passing? Yeah,
I'm still not quite sure yet. I think we'll get some more information on that from Ryan Day later this week. But I would imagine, probably a moment of silence as they did there outside of Ohio Stadium on Tuesday. I would think maybe the players have something, whether it's on their helmets or their jerseys, to honor Dwayne. I'm sure they'll have some kind of video tribute to Dwayne as well. There's always a lot of former players back in town too for a weekend like this. So I suppose I wouldn't be surprised if anyone, felt the urge to kind of get on the mic and say some things about Dwayne in front of what I'm expecting will be a large crowd in Ohio Stadium too. So it's always a fun weekend, the spring game. And it's unfortunate that this, news kind of happened leading into it, but I think the result of that is going to be that the spring game sort of turns into a celebration of Dwayne Haskins more than anything else.
Well, that would be pretty special, wouldn't it? If they could find a way to turn the heavy feelings and try to focus on the joy. And it is wild how many people talk about his smile. That was $1 million smile, and it made an impact for sure. The game is happening in a handful of days. Obviously, that is the thing that people will have, if not in the back, then in the front of their minds. But when the actual game happens, is there a bigger X and O's storyline to watch than the new defense with a new defensive coordinator?
No, I don't think so. I think that's where everybody's eyes will be trained. Obviously, Ohio State is known for its kind of potent offense, and who knows how much like a guy like C.J. Stroud might play in that game, or Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those are guys that I don't think get a whole lot out of a spring game. It's not really for players like that, but certainly you'll see all of Ohio State's best defensive players out there, I would think, for at least a little bit, because they'll take any chance they can get to continue practicing and learning this new defense under Jim Knowles. And I know that's where my eye will be. I'm sure that's where everyone in the stadium will be looking, just to see what's different, how Jim Knowles approaches things, whether or not guys are playing in different positions. And, I think when you look out there, sometimes structurally it might look similar to what Ohio State has done over the last couple of years. But when you talk to the players this spring, it seems like there's going to be a lot more complexity within that. I don't know how much of that they'll show in the spring game, because we all know that football coaches like to play things close to the vest.
Right.
But I do think we'll see a little bit of a different flavor from a Jim Knowles defense, what we've seen in the past year.
So it sounds like we might not get a ton of insight on the dramatic changes, if there are any defensively. But what about players? Is there a name on defense that we should keep our eyes and ears out for?
Yeah, I would look up at the defensive line, and I realize that some spring games don't always mimic real football, but it depends on how much contact I suppose the coaches want them to have, and thus like the pass rush maybe isn't quite so instructive or informative. But I think for this game in particular, I want to watch Ohio State's defensive line. I want to watch guys like Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, a couple of defensive ends, Mike Hall at defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams defensive tackle, because I think for all the issues that Ohio State had on defense last year, I think a lot of it went back to their inability to pressure the quarterback, at least in a way that we've become accustomed to with Ohio State. They've always had a tremendous defensive line, always really got after quarterbacks. And that just really didn't happen last year. And frankly, didn't happen a ton the year before. And I think people want to see Ohio State get back to that. So I'll be watching that group up front first and foremost on Saturday.
It was a bonkers wide receiver room last year. It is a bonkers wide receivers room this year. And yet, Bill, I'm reading a lot specifically about Marvin Harrison Jr. Why?
He's special, man. He's got whatever that it is. He certainly has it. And I guess, when you're the son of an NFL Hall of Famer, maybe you're born with it. But I think the thing with Marvin, and if you talk to anybody about him, is that he doesn't walk into a room and just act like, like I'm Marvin Harrison's son. I expect everything to happen for me. Like, he really works hard for it. He's a technician, I think, at his position. He's obviously advanced. I think he's someone who showed up last year as a true freshman, just in a much better physical state than I think Ohio State expected him to be, because he was in high school. He was a tall kid, but he was also very skinny, just kind of frail. And you thought, okay, it's going to take him a year or two to kind of get the size he needs to be at before he can really get on the field and contribute. But to credit him, he showed up kind of ready to do that. Played a little bit last year, had a great Rose Bowl, obviously. And this spring, it seems like that's continued for him. So Jackson Smith-Njigba is the guy. Obviously, I think he'll probably be the best receiver in college football this year. But it's not a one-man show here by any stretch. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has a chance to be very good. Emeka Egbuka does. Julian Fleming does. Cameron Babb, if he can stay healthy. Jaden Ballard. It's a deep room, and I think as long as Brian Hartline's here, it's going to continue to be that way.
Can you compare for me the attitude, the motivation that the team has this year compared to other years? And ask specifically because they always beat Michigan, and they didn't. They always win the Big Ten, and yet this year they didn't.
Yeah, I think you can feel that. I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were talking with some of the offensive linemen, and Luke Whippler, who's a third-year center on the team and started last year, will start again this year, said that morning when they were eating breakfast, you find folks at Big Ten Network were showing the 1 hour kind of cut up of the Ohio State-Michigan game last year, and Luke Whippler said he wanted to tear the TV off the wall. So I think it's resonated with them. It certainly frames their mind. And it does every year, but it weighs a little heavier after you lose that game, after you don't make the playoff, after your rival sort of calls into question your toughness after they beat you. So there's a lot of things that go into that. Obviously, there are challenging games before Ohio State plays Michigan at the end of the year, including their opener against Notre Dame. So I don't think they want to become fully distracted by that, but it's certainly fueling them this offseason.
Let's remind Luke, I am not in our programming department, so he can take his anger out elsewhere. Before we let you go, Bill, if I made you pick one Heisman favorite from Ohio State this year, and I gave you C.J. Stroud at QB, I gave you Jackson Smith-Njigba, you just said is the best wide receiver in the country, and I gave you Trevion Henderson, which one are you taking? Man,
that is really difficult. And I feel like that's a conversation we're going to have all year. I guess I would say CJ, right? Because it's a quarterback award. And I think those guys tend to get the most shine out of anybody else. But whatever success CJ has will certainly be a product of the weapons around him. But he's a very special quarterback in his own right. And I think what you saw from him in the Rose Bowl last year is going to carry forward to this year. And I think he's going to have a special season. So I'd pick him. I think he'd have to be the favorite among those three.
I think we will be hearing those names no matter what for months and months in that discussion. You're right. Bill Landis from The Athletic. Always great stuff. Thanks for your insight, man.
Yep, thanks, Mike.
So again, spring football, not done yet, not even close. Up next, Ohio State and Michigan State this weekend, starting at noon Eastern, 11 Central from Columbus. Then at 2 Eastern, 1 Central, we take you to East Lansing. It's all right here on the Big Ten Network.